Good afternoon. I will call the meeting to order at 4:03. We will start by taking attendance of the commission members. Brandon Crookshank, not present. Justin Denardi,
Good morning or good afternoon, present.
good afternoon. Mark Eckhoff.
Matt Eckhoff, here.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, Matt, thank you.
Thanks.
Joe,
Good to see everybody.
Joe Koenig,
Present.
Bob Kuhn, and Josh Stone.
Josh Stone is present. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Okay. We'll enter in the public comment. At this time, any member of the public may address the commission on any subject within the commission's jurisdiction that is not on this meeting's agenda. The Arizona open meeting law prohibits the commission from discussing or taking action on an item that is not listed on the prepared agenda. Commissioners may, however, respond to criticism made by those addressing the commission, ask staff to review a matter, or ask that a matter be placed on a future agenda. To address the commission on an item that is on the agenda, please wait for the chair to call for public comment at the time the item is heard. With that, a reminder, public comments will be 3 minutes for any items. Do we have any public comment for items that are not on this afternoon's agenda? There are none in the room. Are there any online?
My name is Leroy Chavez. I live at 6090 North Mountaineer Road. Lived in Flagstaff for 76 years, so I know some of that area that they say that the industrial area was not there. But I do have a comment on something that's not on your agenda, and that's the diverters. I was at the meeting when they were talking about that diverters, and everybody in that meeting was against them diverters. I have talked to Reed, the traffic engineer, and he had no idea why those diverters were put up there. So it turned Dodge into a private street. And what I think that the whole problem was that they didn't like the water trucks coming from Alpha 89 going down Dodge. Well, guess what? They diverted them from Dodge, but they'd come down Mountaineer Road anyway. So I don't know what the whole reason for those diverters was, and I would like to see them taken down. When I come from Marketplace to my house on Mountaineer Road and Smokerise Drive, I have to turn on Empire, and I have to go on Dakota. I have to come down Smokerise Drive, turn left on Mountaineer Road. Why? That's the same reason. That's the same problem that the people on Dodge have. They can't go from Marketplace right onto Dodge. They got to go the same way I just did. So I don't understand why those diverters are there, and nobody can tell me why. City engineers or the traffic engineers can't tell me why. And the people come down Mountaineer Road from the that Indian Health Center over there. They come down here to turn on to Smokerise Drive to get the light. You cannot turn left on 89 off of Trails End, because if you've ever been there, the traffic going north or south, you got to wait for a long, long time to try and make a left turn. Right turn's no problem. You can wait a little while, but left turn, no. So they were going to do some kind of, I don't know, try to see what, if they could put a traffic light in there, but I have never heard back. So they said, well, they're too close together. Well, guess what? There's all the way down in 89, they're all stacked up together, them lights. And if they don't put a light there, the speeders, they don't go 45 miles an hour down that road. And the Mountaineer Road is a long road that's about 3 or 4 or 5 blocks long. People come down there really fast. They said, well, we tested it and it's, the average speed is 31 miles an hour. Well, the people that are going slow and the people that are going 40 miles an hour, their average is out to 31 miles an hour. So there is speeders going down there going 40 miles an hour. And the city police department says they don't have enough manpower to even check it. So there we go. So I wish that you guys could do something about those diverters. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kuhn joined us. Welcome. It's okay. Yes? Yep.
Hi, we're the Christophers, Kurt and Wanda. We live on Mountaineer Road also in Smokerise. We just had a couple concerns. We're concerned about the dust, obviously, that's coming off the mountain. And we were wondering if they might be able to use a water truck to maybe keep some of that dust down. Sheep Hill, we call it. And then, because the fine dust, literally you can vacuum every day and it's just full of that fine dust. And you can see it coming in your windows and everything. And then we were wondering if there was ever an impact study done by the ADEQ about if there's any impact to us with the dust that we're breathing. And at the time that they're running the trucks, like this morning was 5:50 a.m. with the backup beepers, and you can hear it throughout the whole neighborhood. So, plus the trucks obviously going up and down the road. So,
Okay,
yeah, that was it.
I mean, even Blocklight runs a water truck for the dust problem. It would just, that would be great.
Work
Probably
with-
help out quite a bit. That cinder, fine cinder dust. Okay,
And that was our basic concerns.
Okay, thank you.
and everything this gentleman said that we've witnessed ourselves.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you. Just a reminder for the group here, if we could save the comments for the items on the agenda, which include the trails in and Smokerise neighborhood, as well as the Fremont Boulevard traffic calming. If we could save those comments for the agenda items, be appreciated. Any other public comments?
I have one more. I have one more. Mountaineer Road is used as a drainage. And if you look up there at an 89 by the park ranger station, right off of 89, there's a big drainage pipe. That pipe, when it rains or snows and the snow melt, there's water coming right off that pipe right there underneath the park ranger station. And then it goes down across the street there and down our side of the road. Our side of the road has a curb that's about 8 inches high, and that's the reason for the drainage. But when they plow, there's a winter, and this, I'm sure, I know that this was not a very good winter for that, but When the plow comes through, I talked to the plow guy and he said, well, we go down the middle of the road and then we plow both sides. Well, when he goes down the middle of the road, his blade is turned towards my street. So he plows the road and plows this side with a bunch of snow. Then he goes back on the other side, which is on the sunny side, on the west side. And then he comes back and plows the whole pile of snow that he just moved to the right onto my side of the street, which means that this year I had a 5-foot berm there and I had the snow going right into my sidewalk and my lawn. Okay, now, because of the drainage problem, as soon as the snow starts to melt, the street is just full of water because they plowed all the snow onto my side of the street. And then I have to dig out my driveway about 8 feet out into the street because they plowed all the snow on my side. And that's the side where where the water drains come down there. Even when there's a little rain like this, we have water just pouring down that street, which is okay. But, you know, I don't know why you have to drain 89 to a neighborhood. And I think it's drains from the other side where the ditch is on the other side of 89. And it goes down there's a big old pipe coming underneath the road onto our neighborhood. You know, I don't know when they did that engineering feat, but you know, at least they could plow the snow evenly on both sides instead of all on one side. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? I don't see any online. Okay, well, thank you. Also, this month, we have 2 new commission members and just want to recognize them and thank you and welcome you to the Transportation Commission, Bob Kuhn, as well as Josh Stone. So thank you both for joining the commission. New business. First item is Transportation Commission Chair and Vice Chair. Annually, the Transportation Commission membership votes on chair and vice chair position. This past year, Kate Morley served as the chair, and then I served as the vice chair. When Kate Morley stepped down due to a new role, I've been running the meetings as in her place as the vice chair. And so wanted to open up discussion as well as nominations or self-nominations for the chair and vice chair roles. Do you have any input from the commissioners? Yep, press and hold the button.
Do you feel that you can run this position now that you've been actively running, being as a chair?
I think I can, certainly. Don't want to deny others the opportunity if they want to have the opportunity, but I'm happy to fill either role.
I would be interested in being either the vice chair or the chair.
Thank you. Any others? We have a few commissioners are absent tonight, so I think that opens them up for being volunteered. Okay. Don't see any other input from commissioners. Commissioner Koenig, I'll let you take your pick which one you'd like to self-nominate for.
I'll self-nominate for the chair position.
Excellent. And I'll self-nominate to maintain the vice chair. With that, we will, let's take
I'll second that.
let's take so I'll put that out there as a motion then for Commissioner Koenig to be the chair and for myself to be the vice chair. And then Commissioner Kuhn provide the second. Is there any comments? No comments? All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Good, thank you.
I'm assuming this starts the next meeting. I'll let you continue.
I was just getting ready to unplug my computer. Okay, second item in new business, citizens petition for Trails Inn and Smokerise neighborhood.
I could have clicked on the pickleball one. That would have been fun, right? No. All right. Hi, Stephanie Santana, transportation engineer here at the city. We will be discussing the Trails End and Smokerise neighborhood citizen petition and some mitigation measures, a mitigation measure that we have to address this. So for a little bit of background, there is an existing industrial property adjacent to a residential neighborhood called Smokerise. Smokerise is on the northeastern side of town, kind of above the mall. Trails End neighborhood in Dodge, you can kind of see it on here, 89 is right there. Within the last year, this property has become an active construction storage yard. So the yard is right over here on this parcel. Yes. What do I do? Give us 1 second online. Sorry about that online. Jeff will share his screen, confirm with me when he does, and we'll get started again. Man, this is so confusing. Here's our instructions. Okay. This map is just a little bit different and I don't have control, so I'll have Jeff point to the items. So the construction yard is right about there at the end of Retreat Circle. Let's see. This has resulted in heavy truck traffic taking access from an approved driveway on Trails End at Dodge. So the approved access, if Jeff can point to it, pops out right on Trails End right there. So that access has been approved for the construction yard. Residents in the neighborhood submitted a petition to council, and council heard that petition in May. The petition was requesting a different route for Billy Todd to access his industrial parcels. This image on the right shows some of the options from that petition, but I don't want to confuse that petition with what we're talking about today. We're only taking a tiny part of that petition and trying to help the neighborhood with that. A bigger conversation will be happening in the future with that. So council actually voted to refer this matter to transportation engineering staff and the Transportation Commission to make recommendations to council. Next slide, please. So one item that was brought up during the petition discussion was truck traffic cutting through the neighborhood on Mountaineer. There's an existing truck route prohibition signed and posted on Dodge, but not Mountaineer. City staff recommends approval by the commission that Mountaineer is designated a prohibited truck route. The process for doing this is documented in our city code and a policy has been established. A truck prohibition requires approval by the Transportation Commission. Postcards were mailed to 57 residents along Mountaineer on July 19th, and hopefully we'll hear from some of those citizens tonight. This is just the first step in mitigating the concerns of the neighborhood. City staff will be back to Transportation Commission with updates on the larger matter and those route conversations. That is honestly all I had. If there's any questions from commission, I'm happy to answer them, or Jeff? Yeah, if you guys aren't familiar with the area, I'll have Jeff highlight where Mountaineer is. So this is Mountaineer, and that is not designated a truck route. That's what we're requesting to designate a truck route. And then Dodge is a truck route currently, which is just behind it right there. Dodge is a truck prohibited route. Sorry. Thanks, David.
What's the count per day on truck, number of trucks?
I don't have that data. One of the neighbors had said around 10, kind of looking to read because he was out there with me, but I think around 10 is what they had counted. We do have counts from many years ago along Mountaineer. And I don't have that data in my mind right now.
Councilmember McCarthy?
Thank you. I'm kind of familiar with this because I've been out there, but could you refresh my memory on like which street is Dodge and which streets they're allowed to drive on, which they're not, and just show us up there? I guess, Jeff, you have to do that.
Sure, I will steer. So Trails End is currently open to trucks, and the access point to the new construction yard is about right here, and they access up to this area. Dodge Avenue has a diverter here that only allows traffic northbound out of this street. As one of the earlier speakers mentioned, this has probably been at least 15 years ago. There was a concern, and it was valid, that people hauling water to Donny Park and areas beyond would come down 89, they'd turn left on Trails End, and they'd use Dodge to get to the standpipe. And it was actually pretty consistent trucking back and forth. We also had Coconino County Public Works using it, ADOT yard. There was a lot of trucks on Dodge. It's a really wide street. It actually kind of functioned okay, but there was definitely a quality of life issue with all those trucks. So we created a truck prohibition on Dodge and put diverters at both ends. The concern from the neighborhood is that with this new, there's some existing concern about Mountaineer being used as a truck route, and there's a lot of concern as this construction yard develops and gets more active, that there'll be more trucks trying to use Mountaineer to work their way through the neighborhood over to the traffic signal at, it's just off the screen, but at the traffic signal at Smokerise. That was a long-winded answer to your question.
So, okay, Dodge is the street north and south on the right, no trucks allowed. Then the next one, north and south to the left, they are driving on that. Is that proposed to be no trucks?
That's correct.
And then the east-west kind of street, that's where trucks would be directed.
Yeah,
And there's no alternative to that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments, discussion from the commissioners, and then we will open it up for public comment.
Yeah, I have a question. Can you clarify which portion of Dodge is the entire thing truck prohibited, or is it just that northern section that's more residential?
It's the whole residential section. So it starts here at Trails End, and then if you have a map open, it goes almost to Empire, like a block or two north of Empire is where the other diverter is.
And so is part of the reason that the trucks are taking this alternative route because there's no light at Trails End and they're trying to make a left?
We have not done any surveying, but that seems likely that it's running through that neighborhood is quicker or perceived quicker than waiting to turn left.
And my other question was, is the construction yard a permitted item for the city, or is that something somebody can do on their property?
The construction yard that kind of started these conversations is a permitted use. Yes.
What's the width of Trails End?
I would guess that it's a old 40-foot cross-section or 37-foot cross-section. It's pretty wide. I can add that, there's just, sorry, the original PowerPoint had more details, but I can add, and because there was a question before, it is true that the city will look at traffic signal warrants at that intersection of Trails End and 89. Once this subdivision, the retreat circle, is built out, that'll probably coincide with the construction yard having some more traffic, so we'll kind of be at peak. There isn't a lot more land out here to develop, so those things kind of peak out here in the next 6 to 12 months. We'll take a look and see if a traffic signal is warranted. There's a bunch of different tests we do, but many of them are volume based. So, and the main street 89 clearly meets the box. The side street is in question.
Just to confirm, the roadway asphalt width is about 46 feet, and that's right in front of the residential houses, and we allow parking in front of those houses on the north and south side of Trails End.
And so the reason we're bringing this to you is because the citizens are concerned that there's a bit of an issue now and it could be a future issue. Truck prohibitions per city code are need to be run through the Transportation Commission before they can be enacted. So this is one of those things that are part of your roles and responsibilities. So it is set up that you can, you have discussion and public comment, but just want to lay it out for you a little bit. You can vote on it tonight. It's set up that way, or we can, wait 2 months and talk about it again if there's some additional information, new counts, different things. So it's not super urgent, but it's ready for your decision if you feel ready. So.
Okay. Commissioner Eckhoff?
Thank you. Hey, Jeff, I'm not super familiar with the background and kind of the history on, the other pieces that are connected to this in the agenda packet that are certainly beyond the purview of this commission. I just want to ensure that, the other pieces of the citizens' concerns, around dust and environmental issues have been referred to the appropriate, points, from council or otherwise.
Yeah, there's an ongoing multi-department kind of investigation, if you will, to try to sort out all of those things that are on the petition. And then you'll hear public comments that also have more concerns than were on the petition. Yeah, ADEQ has been out for multiple inspections. There's a whole bunch of things going on out there, but we're focusing tonight, or our purview, the Transportation Commission's purview at this point, is this truck prohibition on Mountaineer is kind of a first step that we thought we could get done in a little bit more quickly. But yeah, we will have to regroup on how we get them all the different answers out to the community and this commission in the future.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeff.
Sure.
Thank you. If there's, I think next we'll open it up to public comment. Is there any comments from the public, either in person or online? Yep.
There's just a very strong smell randomly of diesel, number 2 diesel coming down through the neighborhood. I don't know if it's coming off the hill when they refill or something for the trucks. Just pointing that out.
Mm-hmm.
That's also a part of the project on the mountain. I mean, as an alternative, maybe they could move the entrance to this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments from the room or online? Not seeing any, we will open it back up to the commission for discussion specifically, I mean, general comments, questions, but also speaking to the request here for regarding Mountaineer, designating Mountaineer as a truck prohibited route per the City of Flagstaff code.
Just adjust the screen.
Jeff, can you clarify, I see here in the city code that the Transportation Commission may designate a traffic, truck prohibition route. Is there a different process to reverse that, or would the Transportation Commission also be the ones to reverse that if it turned out to be the wrong decision or causing undue stress in other places?
Without looking at the code, I would assume that it's the Transportation Commission that would undo one of these as well. But I don't think it's spelled out explicitly.
Are there any other comments or questions from the commission? Councilmember McCarthy?
Was the the company that uses the trucks in this area, were they notified about this meeting tonight?
Yes, they were.
Thank you.
Just as a discussion point, I'm inclined to say we should implement a truck prohibition route tonight. It seems like there's a path that may have a longer left turn, but they'd still be able to use it. And worst case, we could take it away in 2 or 4 or 6 months, whatever it takes.
Thank you. And a question, Jeff, that I have in our packet, there was a picture of a sign limiting the weight of a vehicle. Was that for Mountaineer, or what road was that photo taken from, or was that from an adjacent road?
I believe it's the existing sign for Dodge Avenue.
For Dodge Avenue, okay.
I was pulling it up to confirm, but I'm pretty sure that's what was in there.
Sorry, those weren't our pictures. I think they were part of the petition. That's why we weren't 100% sure.
Okay.
I guess on that point, do we know how many of the current trucks would be over 26,000 pounds? I'm not super familiar with heavy equipment.
We don't have current counts, but we've heard, or we have old counts, that it's in the range of 10 vehicles a day right now. And so the finer point on these truck prohibitions is that if the vehicle has a destination, like if you were getting gravel delivered on your street, truck prohibition would not apply. So it's only for through vehicles that don't have a destination on that street. We can do follow-up counts. I mean, if you're not, as I said before, if you're not comfortable at this point, we can do some follow-up counts to give you exact numbers. We felt that it being a residential neighborhood, the concerns, we just kind of move forward without all of that typical due diligence that you're accustomed to.
Yeah, I think my comments generally are with Mountaineer being a residential road, and with the adjacent road already having the restrictions for the previous concern with the ADOT and the county yard and hauling water that kind of naturally with traffic, that it's like water, it gets kind of pushed over to the next road over. So for similar logic and reasoning, and I mean, I would be in favor of providing that similar restriction on Mountaineer, and particularly knowing that there is adequate access to the site via Trails End. So it's not precluding or prohibiting access to the industrial area, the industrial lot, but just keeping that heavy traffic out of the residential area. That's my input, my thoughts for the commissioners. If there's any additional thoughts or dialogue.
I too believe, and I have a little background. I was on the traffic commission for a number of years. I've been on for a while. Mixing trucks in residential areas, I've always been a proponent of limiting them. If they have business on that road, it's okay, but they should be forced to go around a residential area.
Thank you, Commissioner Kuhn. To the other commissioners, is there any additional information needed? Or generally, what are your thoughts on if there's any follow-up discussion, or is it something the commission's prepared to vote on tonight?
Commissioner, in support of what I've discussed so far, and will be behind, the prohibition route requested by staff.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Eckhoff, it was hard to hear you. We couldn't understand what you were saying.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm in support of what's been discussed so far, as far as moving forward with designating Mountaineer a truck prohibition route.
Thank you. Sounds like Commissioner Kuhn is also in favor of providing that. Commissioner Koenig?
I was just gonna go ahead and motion to designate Mountaineer a truck prohibition route per city code.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I will
I'll second that.
Okay, are there any additional comments? All in favor? Aye.
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 Vote. Thank you. Opposed? Very good. That is it for new business tonight. Moving into the old business section, Fremont Boulevard traffic calming.
We think technology is back working. We'll see here in a minute. Martin and David are going to tag team this one for you tonight. They have a pretty good presentation, pretty good length.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Martin Entz. This is David Lemke. We are both with the Transportation Section, and we are here to present information on Fremont Boulevard and the traffic calming project. And our goal for tonight with the Commission is to present the results of some community engagement that we've done since the last time we were before you. That includes a neighborhood walkthrough and an online survey. We have a list of potential changes to Fremont Boulevard that we'll have you review and discuss and hopefully provide a little bit of direction. We'd like to hear your preliminary thoughts and comments on what we've come up with so far. And then finally, a bit more specifically, we have a couple of potential striping cross sections for you to review. And again, we're looking for your thoughts and comments and potentially direction to move us to the next phase. So a bit of an outline for tonight. I'll turn it over to David and he'll give you a little bit of description of the project, including the background and history. He'll go through the results of our community engagement, both the neighborhood walkthrough and the survey, and talk about some of the results or what we heard from that engagement. I'll take the microphone after that and describe some of the potential improvements or changes that we've come up with. We'll look a little bit at funding opportunities and we'll talk about next steps at the conclusion of the discussion. So with that, I'll turn it over for the moment to Mr. Lemke.
All right, thank you, Martin. Good evening, commissioners. My name is David Lemke. I'm a transportation engineer associate here at the city. And like Martin said, I'm going to take over for this Fremont presentation. So Fremont Boulevard runs through the Cheshire neighborhood. It is about 3/4 of a mile in length from Fort Valley Road to Peakview Street, 4-lane section, standard bike lanes, 5-foot sidewalks, no parkway. And the goals for this street are traffic calming to reduce vehicle speeds and enhance pedestrian and bike facilities, especially near crossings. Here is a plan view of the site. Fremont Boulevard is outlined in red. And just to give you a little background in history, I know we have a few new commissioners tonight. In 2021, in response to neighborhood speed concerns, traffic data was collected along the corridor, and it was determined that traffic calming was warranted based on speeds and volumes. And this was also reflected in 2022 because potential traffic calming solutions were presented to Transportation Commission and the public, and Transportation Commission directed staff to restripe the roadway in the short term and explore different long-term solutions. And then in December 2022, community outreach and engagement options were presented to the Transportation Commission. And in May 2023, we conducted our community survey and neighborhood walkthrough. And the reason we didn't go through with our original striping plan was that we heard some outreach from the neighborhood that they wanted something a little different than what we proposed. And that's why we decided to go forward with more community involvement, neighborhood survey, neighborhood walkthrough to really understand the needs of the neighborhood and the expectations. So the neighborhood walkthrough was conducted Wednesday, May 17th, 2023 at 5 p.m. You can see a nice picture here with city and Metro Plan staff were present and about 30 residents in attendance. And the community survey was open May 17th through June 10th, 2023 on the online Flagstaff community forum. We also mailed out 180 postcards letting people know about the walkthrough and the survey. So to really get the word out there. The survey included mapping exercises to identify problems and opportunities, and we had 41 responses submitted. And survey results highlights, most respondents live along and frequently use the corridor. Traffic calming and safer crossings are the most important project goals and objectives. And they also identified a number of problems, potential solutions, and other opportunities, which we'll dive into next. And for those at home who have the presentation, feel free to use this link to see the results. But let me dive into them here. So survey results, there's issues with crossings, specifically visibility, the speed of vehicles, and they felt there need to be more crossings in the neighborhood. Vehicle speeds were also referenced and the need for traffic calming to slow speeds through the street. There was support for road diet from 4 to 2 lanes. And there was concern about the pickup and drop off situation at Fala, particularly vehicles parking in the bike lane during pickup and drop off. For enforcement, radar feedback signs were referenced. There's interest in a median down the middle of the road, and snow removal concerns on sidewalks and bike lanes. And there's also interest in wider or buffered bike lanes, specifically bike lanes between the parking and the curb. And now I think I will hand it back off to Martin and he'll dive into these potential components for potential solutions.
Thank you, David. We have a couple slides to run through here, and they're pretty text heavy, but don't worry, we won't make you use your imagination to that extent. There's a few illustrations afterwards that will help show what we're talking about in these slides. So the first component, as David mentioned, there was support for reducing the number of lanes along that Fremont from 4 to 2. The existing volumes of traffic, anticipated future volumes of traffic certainly support 2 lanes and doesn't require 4 lanes. So we will show you 3 different options for how that might occur. It's a little bit of a luxurious situation for us that we don't often encounter, in that we have more room here than we actually need. Usually it's just the opposite. Second component is on-street parking. There is on-street parking on the east side of the roadway, but it ends at the school. So there's nothing in front of from the park through the townhouses up to Fala. Part of our plan would be adding that parking on street. Part of the reason is that would provide a place for vehicles to stage and park during pickup and drop-off times at Fala. Currently, one of the issues identified by the neighborhood is that vehicles use the bike lane to pick up and drop off kids. Now they'll have a place to do that, keep the bike lane open. Crossings, as David mentioned, were mentioned prominently in the survey, including some issues with visibility and placement of crossings. A couple thoughts about how we plan for crossings. We typically look at 4 factors when we're planning for crossings. And those factors are the speed and volume of traffic, the number of lanes that someone would have to cross, and whether or not there's a median in the middle of the road. And based on those 4 factors, there's some pretty well-established tables that tell us how much assistance a pedestrian would need to comfortably or easily cross that road. And as you can imagine, as traffic speeds and volumes go up, the level of assistance that we have to provide goes up as well. And that assistance can be anything from enhancements to the crossing, like including a median, providing high visibility crosswalk markings, making the crossing shorter, and other things that help enhance its visibility. And the improvements can go all the way up to beacon crossings, which you see at a number of places around town, including at Butler and Humphreys, a couple locations along 4th Street. And here the pedestrian presses a button and either an amber flashing light or a red flashing light comes on. And in one case, it's an aid for crossing. It reminds vehicles that there are pedestrians present and they need to yield to those pedestrians. In the other case, it's an actual traffic control device. When there's a flashing red light, it requires vehicles to stop for pedestrians in the crosswalk. So all that is kind of prelude to say that the situation along Fremont is fairly favorable. The traffic volumes are fairly low. There are several thousand ADT, which is at the low end of volumes when we consider crossings. 2 other factors, the speed and the number of lanes to cross, we're looking to affect. So we'll be reducing the roadway from 4 lanes to 2 lanes, and we're looking to slow speeds by the changes that we make. That's really the intent of the project. The third is adding medians, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So we're really trying to affect 3 of the crossing factors, and the 4th one is fairly favorable. Again, this really indicates that it should be relatively easy to cross the street once we've made these changes without necessarily having to provide a lot of enhancements or aids for crossing. In other words, every intersection along the corridor is a legal crosswalk and could be a place where people cross. So with that in mind, I'll describe some of the potential changes that we're suggesting. One is to provide medians at some crucial intersections, so where people want to cross, and we have some good information on that from the survey itself. Ideally, the least expensive option would be to stripe that median. A bit more expensive would be to put a curb around and actually raise it. That would make it much more effective, but we kind of have to see what the costs come out and if that is something that we have funding for. Along the lines of providing more crossing opportunities along the corridor at other locations where there are intersections, we could add curb ramps where they're missing, so it's clear that there's a crossing there, and it's made accessible to everyone in the community. And then finally, there may be opportunities to provide crosswalk markings at more places along the corridor, just as a reminder to motorists that this is a crossing and there may be pedestrians present, and to pedestrians to kind of give them that a sense that this is where they're able to cross. There are existing bike lanes along the corridor on both sides. There are typical 4.5-foot width bike lanes. Because of all the space that we have extra going from 4 lanes to 2 lanes, in all the scenarios that we'll show you, we can add a buffer, and in some cases a generous buffer between the traffic lanes and the bike lanes. Also, where we have on-street parking, we can move the bike lane to the right of on-street parking, which provides a little extra distance as a buffer, and also a little extra buffer if there are actually vehicles parked in the parking lane. All of that helps keep the bike lanes free of snow and cinders. So in a typical situation, we plow snow into a bike lane when there's no other place to store it. This gives us a place to store it. And as far as cinders, it's just the distance between the two that will help keep it a little bit better free of cinders. Sidewalks and foot trails. There are sidewalks along both sides of the roadway now. They are 5 feet in width, and there is no parkway, that buffer strip between the curb and the sidewalk. There's really not too much we can do to improve the sidewalks in a significant way without incurring a significant cost. So we're looking at a couple of minor improvements, including adding an accessible bypass where there are driveways. This provides a level surface, makes them more accessible and doesn't require pedestrians to cross where there's a driveway pan, where there's kind of a steep cross slope. There's a foots trail kind of behind the corridor, but there's one aggregate access point to that trail that comes all the way out to Fremont. So one potential improvement would be to provide a curb ramp, so it's easier to get onto that foots trail. And then we typically pave the first 20 feet of a foots trail in a situation like that, just to provide a little bit better definition, a little bit better access to that trail. Like bike lanes, providing the buffer on the street helps put some distance between where there are vehicles and where people are walking. That provides a little bit of extra comfort for pedestrians and helps keep snow and cinders off of the sidewalk. There's a possibility of introducing some traffic calming elements. I've listed chicanes, medians, and bump outs. These are essentially vertical elements that go in the roadway that require vehicles to make a horizontal shift in their alignment. And depending on how they're designed, that can serve to slow traffic down. We mentioned here the difference between a striped and a raised. Again, striped is an inexpensive way of going about it, but without having something vertical for vehicles to go around, they're going to be less effective. If we can find funding for it, some of those elements could be raised to actually require vehicles to avoid them without and not hit them. And when we do that, since we have bike lanes on the street, we want to be careful to maintain the bike lanes through those traffic calming elements. So we're not either ending the bike lane and requiring bikes to merge into traffic or having them go around. On the enforcement front, there's a couple of spaces along the corridor where we can use radar feedback signs. I think the commission is familiar with what those look like and how they operate. We've used them in a few places around town. And then finally, the concept of asphalt art. And this is an opportunity to paint some of the areas of the roadway that are no longer used for vehicular travel. MetroPlan has submitted a grant to the Bloomberg Foundation that would help with the cost of that. There are still some remaining questions about the appropriateness or legality of their use on a roadway. You'll see in a couple slides that we're proposing them in areas that wouldn't be used by the traveling public, either at vehicles or pedestrians in crosswalks. That should help, but there's still some questions that we have to answer about how those are used. Also, since I'm not sure what their grant is, how much their grant will be for if they get it, but 3/4 of a mile is a long way and an awful lot of paint. So it's likely that the whole corridor wouldn't be subject to art, but maybe strategic spots along it at different locations. So I promised some more visual images. So this is a series of cross sections beginning with what's existing. And you can see we have 4 lanes, bike lanes on both sides, parking lane on one side, and 5-foot sidewalks along both edges. Ask him, you shall receive. All right, so that's the existing section. Now we have the 3 options that we'd like you to take a look at and give us some direction on. The first one moves traffic to the middle of the road. So we have 2 11-foot lanes, an 8-foot parking lane, and then wide striped buffers on both sides before you get to the bike lane. And the bike lane is approximately the same size, about 5 feet between the gutter pan and where that buffer is. Second option includes a median. So here we have striped a 10-foot median in the middle. The travel lanes are to either side, again, parking on one side. Because we added the median, the buffers between the bike lane and vehicle lanes has been reduced to 5 feet. Otherwise, it's the same. And then the last option includes center median that would double as a two-way left turn lane. And that, when I say median, I mean this is a stripe median, at least in the short term. Travel lanes in each direction on either side. Small buffer of 2 feet, 5.5-foot bike lanes, and then parking lanes to the outside of that. So the main difference with this one is it includes parking on both sides and has a more traditional arrangement of the bike lane being inside of the parking lane. And I'll continue before we let you go off with conversation and discussion, show you a couple other elements along the corridor that we've thought of. This section would occur at intersections, and it shows a wide median in the middle that would be striped, a couple of buffers on the edge. And this would really be the condition where we would be asking or giving crosswalks for pedestrians. So you can see that the entire distance of the width of the street is the same, but most of it is painted off in medians or buffers. And really there's only 2 11-foot lanes where they would be potentially in conflict with vehicles. And that's where they would have to be careful while they're crossing. We can look at a different version of that. Here we've added a colorful artistic element to it to kind of call attention to it. Again, this is at street level, so there's nothing vertical here that would prevent vehicles from, straying into that area. Ideally for these medians, if we could find funding or the budget for it, we would raise the median by the height of a curb, so like 6 inches, to actually provide a vertical element that vehicles are required to go around. And then again, if a pedestrian is crossing, they're dealing with traffic coming from one direction at a time. So they cross the first lane, they're only looking to their left, and then they have refuge at the median. They cross the median, and then they look to the right, and only have to deal with traffic coming from their right, instead of having to look for a gap in traffic coming from both directions. And then the final image is really kind of the long-term, very long-term dream solution, where we move bike lanes off the street, actually rebuild the road to make it more narrow, and add a formal median in the middle. I will caution that this solution will likely be quite expensive, on the order of several $1 million. So that city's ability to implement that is going to be limited. It's probably worth mentioning for the other improvements as well. We have a list here, but we haven't costed everything out yet to see what we can afford and what can fit in the budget. So we may have to be a little bit flexible on what the final design looks like, but we'll work through that as part of the next phase. And I did want to show you, this is a version of asphalt art. This is actually in Tucson. They painted the median in this case. And I don't know where this image is from, but they took a lot of unused space at an intersection and kind of tightened things up. I think it's important to note that we're kind of looking at this from the top down, so it looks fairly compelling, but at street level to a pedestrian or to a vehicle or a bicyclist, that the paint is really at the same level of the roadway. And again, I'll mention that we're looking into whether we can use this, but these areas are all places where vehicles wouldn't normally be driving, and it doesn't include the crosswalks. And just to skip ahead to next steps, we do want to go back to the neighborhood and give them a more formal opportunity to comment on some of our proposals, including the lane arrangements. Once we're through that, we'll finalize the list of project components, cost it out, and see what we can afford, and then go back into final design. So with that, I'll go back to some of the cross sections. I'm happy to answer any questions you have first. And beyond that, we're happy to listen to your conversation and your thoughts and comments.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Any Questions, comments from the commission?
Martin, on that painted center island, does that include delineators too, or is it just painted? Any of the plastic ones that we used before?
Commissioner Kuhn, it may, I think we have to circle back with Public Works and find out, like talk to them about what might be possible with delineators in some of those circumstances. That would help, I think, by introducing that vertical element. But of course, we have to be sensitive to how the city does maintenance, including snow plowing. Yeah.
Martin, I had a quick question. Has this been raised or brought to the attention of the Bicycle Safety Commission at all regarding the possible movement of these bike lanes or encroaching parking lanes with them?
Not specifically for Fremont. We do have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow evening, and that's one of their agenda topics, is to talk about the alignment of the bike lanes and that arrangement with the buffer and parked vehicles. So we'll know more after tomorrow about that.
Okay. I think of, my first opinions without having for more time to think about them. The median turn lane, I think it was option 2 or 3, in my mind makes the most sense, because in the times of snow removal, this one, I note that operators in this area put the cold storage in the middle of the road. And it also provides for a turning opportunity for those who need to cross the road into their private drives of their properties without loading traffic in the back or traffic driving around them in the buffer lane or bike lane potentially. That's my initial thought.
Any questions, comments from the commission?
I have a question. Has Follow been involved in the discussion around managing traffic around its facility?
Not yet. I'll have to look to some of my colleagues if we've had discussions with Follow from before.
Hello, my name is Reed Miller. I'm with the transportation section. We met with Follow a few years ago and came up with a striping plan for their parking lot that allowed for 2 inbound queuing lanes. They did implement the striping. I don't think it's currently functioning the way it's striped. I think they're operating a little differently than we had in mind. And that's been a few years ago.
I'll just add to that. I think we would definitely reach out to them as part of the next kind of stage of planning or design.
Martin, which option was it that had the travel lanes kind of pushed to the middle, and then there's parking on each side and then a buffer? And is that the first option? Yes. Has there been discussion about snow plowing on this one with cars parked next to? Because I like the idea generally, giving people a barrier to drive between. Otherwise, it seems like they continue to use the whole road out of habit. It's kind of nice having those barriers being the parked cars right there. But then my mind goes to, there's a lot of pavement there, that if there's cars lined up there in the wintertime, and how they'd be able to clean that off, including the bike lane.
Yeah, I think because we have overnight parking restrictions during winter, in theory, there shouldn't be any cars parked. So they'd be able to do that. The buffer does give them a place to pile snow. I think there's a question about how they would do the bike lane, because that would almost have to be a different pass where they're pushing to the middle into the buffer. A pass that's different from the passes they would do in the normal vehicle lanes, which they're pushing the snow to the outside.
And I think David mentioned, there was a striping plan previously that, was foregone based on some public input. I was curious what that option was and what the feedback was that led to the decision to not do that, proceed with that. Just general, I mean, just a summary if you're able to.
I'll describe what the option looked like. I know there's a few people from the public here. They may want to directly tell you like what they found, how they considered that option and what they thought about it. But generally there was a median in the middle of about 14 feet, two 12-foot lanes, narrow buffer of about 2 feet, bike lanes on both sides, and then a parking lane on one side.
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, I can speak a little bit more to some of the reasons why they felt it wasn't enough. Part of it was they felt the travel lanes were too wide at 12 feet. And the other fear was that with the center left turn lane acting as the median, or it being a center left turn lane, they were afraid cars would use that as a passing lane from vehicles. And so one thing we were definitely considering with these options as we're going forward is that, particularly at Brenda Loop, because that's the existing crosswalk, is that we want to try to look to how to make that as safe as possible, because there is a visibility issue there. But overall, like when we first came up with that striping plan by itself, I feel like the neighborhood, and they can definitely speak to that once we go to public comment, they felt that it was insufficient because it was just striping and not addressing the crosswalk and not having as much of an impact on the speed. So that's why we went away from that one and are coming up with these new solutions with added elements. These cross sections are for the road itself, but there, like Martin said in the beginning, there might be certain sections where we investigate having a refuge island for pedestrians, chicanes, potentially traffic circles for slowing speeds down. Those are all elements that we're trying to strategically place to help reduce speeding as well. But this is mostly for the road diet, these cross sections. That's what those are mostly related to. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I think we'll open up to public comment. Is there any comments from the public, either in the room or online? Absolutely.
And there is one online when you get there.
Hi, Jim Tuck, 2829 North Fremont. I've lived there for 27 years, so we've seen global warming coming upon us. The real issue for us, I think, at home, my wife's disabled and we have our own particular disabilities or accessibility issues to deal with. Snow plowing and snow clearing is random. Somebody stated that snow on Fremont is placed to the center of the road. True? No, it's not true. The snow operator puts the snow where they think they can best do the job. And Scott Overton's been a friend for years. We've talked a lot about Fremont. And snow is going to be a major aspect of how this program will or will not be affected. And when I see the ultimate illustration up there, I think of the snowplow operators walking off the job, because you'll just kill them. We won't be able to get out of our homes because there's no place to put the snow. So I think we need to really, really involve Public Works and real snowplow operators who have run those graders out there at 3 a.m. in the morning, because those guys really work hard to do a good job. And it's really very difficult because we get a lot of snow because Fremont's nice and white. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dennis Homan. I live on Wilson, and I'm very supportive of the two-lane idea. I would like to know where you got the graphic of my wife and I walking, but we do walk around the neighborhood a lot, including crossing Fremont. I ride my bicycle around quite a bit, and we drive, of course. there is no need for parking on both sides of the street, only on the east side. And, you know, and providing something for a staging area for Fala where they don't have to squat on the bike lanes would be a very nice improvement. So I really appreciate the chance for input and have to be somewhere else. Thanks.
Thank you. Next comment?
My name is Jonathan Edwards. I've lived on Fremont for 33 years and on Fremont for 5. I mean, Fremont for 33 and Peakview for 5. Where I live, the snow is plowed into the center, and I appreciate that. I hope it doesn't change. So that's one of the reasons I'm here to say, please don't change that because I do appreciate it. So it is true. It's plowed into the middle on the south end or just below the foothills is where I live. So I appreciate the snow being plowed into the center. And the other thing I would say to slow down the traffic, at least on that end of Fremont, is to put a 3-way stop sign at the top of Peakview and Fremont. And that would slow down the traffic coming from Linwood that sometimes can get somewhat fast. That would stop them there and going both ways. So a three-way stop sign at the top of Peakview and Fremont, I think would mitigate some of the issues with the speeding. And thank you for plowing into the center, at least where I live. Thank you.
Thank you. Online, public comment from Sasha Stortz.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So first, I just want to say such a huge thank you to Martin and Dave and the rest of the folks at the city. Just seeing this, I feel really heard. You know, I think there's been a lot of back and forth here, and I just want to commend the city for really listening and taking neighborhood concerns into account. Obviously, a lot of people really care about this place. For the commission's benefit, part of why we really care is because in order to send our kids to school or a friend's house or to the playground or the urban trail, they have to cross 4 lanes of traffic, wider than Highway 180. So, you know, my biggest question is which option, what's the design speed? What will really slow down traffic of these various options? And really want to advocate for designing for the speed that we want vehicles to go. Excited to see more crosswalks on the table, more marked crosswalks. I think that's huge. And personally would prefer no center lane. You know, this is a pretty low volume traffic area, so there's a huge opportunity to just be realistic with volume flows. I hear folks on snow and I hear folks on turning, but at the same time, if you have to stop because someone's turning to go home, you have to be paying attention, you have to be slowing down. So, you know, I think my last comment is just continue please to look to the neighbors for help, whether it's seeking funding from creative sources or the conversations that we've already had with Fala in the past about potential to partner on painting. You've got a lot of resources and a lot of folks who care here. So thanks for hearing us. I'm really excited about where this is going.
Thank you. Next comment from online, Kyle Doherty.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks for letting me speak. I just wanted to point out one of the most problematic aspects of speeding on Fremont is folks will, between the Brenda intersections, Brenda's a loop, between the two Brenda intersections, there's like a bend in the road, and that's where like the fastest speeding occurs, in my opinion. And those who are most reckless in their driving will go straight down the middle of the road. They'll cross over the double yellow. And so I think that any sort of feature that exists in the middle of the middle of Fremont should include some vertical element, particularly in that area if we have to triage from a budget perspective, because if it's just like a striped median or something, people are just going to drive right over it. The reckless people who are going like 40 or whatever. So if you pursue sort of a median approach, I strongly encourage a median with vertical elements between the two Brenda intersections. With regard to snow plowing, I'm in favor of putting snow in the center of the road. I'm not sure how that interacts logistically with a vertical element, but from the perspective of pedestrians, I don't think that there's sort of ambient snowfall and traveling over the sidewalk is a problem. It only becomes a problem when the plow diverts a huge mountain of snow onto the sidewalk. I think people can manage when it's just sort of ambient snowfall on the sidewalk versus a mountain put onto the sidewalk by a plow. So yeah, again, I support putting snow in the middle of the road. That's, I think, the most beneficial solution for Fremont. And I think it wasn't really discussed at length here, but increasing the number of formalized crossings along Fremont would be ideal. I think some good targets for that would be at Sheila and Wilson. And that would just offer pedestrians another obvious way to get across without having to rely on this like sort of unknown law which states that every intersection is a pedestrian crossing. I don't think that's common knowledge. So if we have a visual element there that indicates there's crossings at Sheila and Wilson, that would be great. And with that, I'll sign off. Thank you.
Thank you. Next comment from online, looks like Audrey Cruz.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I want to echo what the last two callers just said in really sharing my appreciation for David and Martin for coming out for the walkthrough. That was, I think, really important to clarify some of the things that we've been, we as the members of the Cheshire neighborhood have been expressing. And it was really nice to be able to do that in a face-to-face way. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. And I also wanted to echo basically what Kyle was just saying about having like a raised or some kind of center median that has vertical reminders of how fast people are going, and that really deters people from being able to cross over the different lanes. And I also support snow being plowed into the center. As you can see, I have a little kid, and trying to push a stroller across streets, like when I do have to cross streets and there are huge embankments of snow, is basically impossible. So I think I also appreciated that someone suggested we involve the snow plowing, the folks that actually have to do it. And I think that would be a really good next step. So I just want to applaud the work that's been done so far. I really appreciate these new design elements. I continue to support just 2 lanes as a diet with a vertical median, at least in some places, and greater attention to crosswalk visibility. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments from the public? I am not seeing any online or in the room. So we will come back to the commission for some final discussion and thoughts for Martin and David on the different options and input.
Thanks, guys, for the presentation. And as well, thanks for taking the time to do the community outreach and do the walkthrough. It sounds like the primary objective is still reducing speeds. And so I guess it would be interesting to rate your options based on speed reduction. I think it sounds like we have 2 challenging situations where snow clearing, it's nice to put all the snow in the middle. But if you have a median in the middle or a center turning lane, that's an opportunity for people to speed. The nice thing about not having a median is people have to slow down for people that are turning. And same thing with keeping the parking lane close to it. I think you guys have stated in previous times that, you know, having narrower roads that where people have to navigate obstacles, including other cars, is one of the primary means of slowing people down. When I see raised center medians, I'm concerned about situations like on Woody Mountain Road and some other roads. It doesn't provide a space for cars to get around bicycles. If bicycles are in the bike lane, in this situation, you have a huge buffer, and so that makes it a little bit better. Yeah, just something to keep in mind is not to have a raised median with not enough space for bike lanes.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments from the commission? Yes, council member?
I've been down the street but not for a long time. Are there driveways that go out onto this street?
Yes, there are. On certain sections on the northernmost section of Fremont, there's limited driveways, but as you get further into the neighborhood, there are more driveways fronting the street.
Right. So my concern is that if someone wants to pull into the driveway and there's a raised median in the middle, they won't be able to do that. So they'll have to go up and then make a U-turn and come back. And with a real narrow street, will they be able to make U-turns? Or will they have to drive through the neighborhood and, you know, then make a left turn? So that's something to think about as you go through these options.
That's a good point. Similar to, I think, University Heights, there's that, the south portion of that similar.
Certainly, thank you.
There's been some comments, questions regarding the turn lane. I'm just curious, do we have data? Do we know if the turn lane's warranted? Because I know going from 4 lanes to 2, it's a pretty big reduction in lanes.
Certainly. So this Fremont is classified as a minor collector. And because of that, like our standard city standards, we do have standard cross sections for those types of roads. And in our city standard, a center turn lane is there. It is part of the standard. So to answer your question, it's not so much based, well, it is based on volumes because to be a minor collector, you have to have a certain amount. So a center turn lane is warranted for this road. And Jeff might have something to say as well.
No, I mean, you're right on. It's our typical section for this type of classification would have a center turn lane, knowing that the road is built out, like most all residential units have been built out. We don't expect increased volumes on this road. The volumes are pretty low for a collector. They're higher than a local street where we wouldn't have turn lanes, but they're not very far into collector. So for kind of a special traffic calming project, we're comfortable with the 2 lanes. There are limitations to that. You don't get the ped crossing in the middle if you don't have a center turn lane. You can't plow to the middle, but it is a narrower section. I'm not sure if we know if it actually has a speed difference than having a center turn lane, because it's all just striping anyways. People can, the volumes are low enough that people can cut across a double yellow or a 2-way left turn lane. So it probably doesn't make a big difference in that regard, but the neighborhood, I think, generally is, at least the folks that we've heard from, generally likes the idea like on the screen that doesn't have a center turn lane. And we're comfortable with that. So just a little more detail to what David said.
Thank you.
And then my kind of input on this is seeing the presentation. Thank you for the presentation. A lot of great information in there. I do like the long term with the median or with the curbs and all of that built, the separated elevated bike lane, the landscaping. That's a nice appealing roadway section. I think it does help with having those vertical elements as well with the traffic calming as opposed to striping. But I think for the short term and being able to implement something in the near future as opposed to having to wait for funding potentially for a bigger project like that. It makes a lot of sense for the striping option. I like Martin, you'd mentioned the next step is getting some more feedback from the public on what the different options are that you guys have come up with. I like to hear some of the public's input from the next round of outreach. And then seeing what the pricing is, so the logical next steps. Hearing that the turn lane's not necessarily, warranted. I mean, I would have concerns, but I don't have the same amount of information as you guys, and that's completely fine. I don't necessarily need all of that, but going from 4 lanes to 2 lanes and not having a turn lane, about having an overcorrection, if you will. But just initial thoughts looking at the different options. It's nice too having that buffer for lots of space there for plowing and snow storage. I think it's a good use of the roadways there. It's a nice problem to have. You don't have it in very many areas. All
Certainly.
that space.
I guess I had one more comment about the bike lanes. I would echo Commissioner Denardi about it'd be great to get feedback from the Bicycle Advisory Committee on this. And I generally support a bike lane with a buffer and the parking there. I think that's good. My main question is around intersections. What does that look like? And how far back does the parking stop? Because the risk of somebody being hidden by cars and somebody making a right or left-hand turn and not being able to see the cyclist. It'd be nice to see what that looked like in application from above.
All right, thank you. And I think we do have enough to go from here and start taking some of what we've heard tonight and making the next steps forward. At least that's my take on it. I don't know if Jeff.
I wasn't
Yeah.
super clear, so I was going to offer
Okay.
maybe we should run through all the elements and just kind of get a feel.
Mhm.
Would that be helpful?
I-
That'd be
I-
helpful for me to kind
Yeah.
of go through, center turn lane or not. I think 2 travel lanes is obvious. Parking on one side or 2. I guess there's an arrangement of bike lane combination. We have a lot of combinations here.
Mhm.
I've heard good feedback, but I'm not sure it's all jiving. There probably is some conflicts when I look back through my notes. So
I think I have one more comment. Would be, these cross sections are mostly cross sections, so we spend a lot of time talking about those, and we necessarily see like where the crossings would be. While I don't support raised medians because of the inability of cars to get out of the way of other things, I think locally raised medians around crosswalks are great, especially if that also provides a chicane as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, if it's helpful, Jeff, if we want to run through the particular item, portions of the cross section we want to take a look at, we can talk through those specifically.
All right.
So I was thinking maybe just bounce between the options. Maybe we start, sidewalks don't change. So maybe we just talk about the bike lanes. Would that work to bounce through I don't even know how many you guys have.
So
3 or 4 here. And so we could just talk about the bike parking configuration and maybe get some consensus on where you all think we should head with this one.
certainly, yeah. So to recap, the 3 options that Martin showed was this one here with the center lane in the middle and the bike lane kind of traditionally next to the parking lane next to the sidewalk. These options where the bike lanes are flush with the curb and parking's on the other side. And this is another variation. So I guess maybe that's the first question. Are we leaning more towards the bike lane being close to the sidewalk or the bike lane being more traditional, being next to the parking lane?
So that is a very traditional layout is what you see here. This has the 3 lanes. The only element that you don't see anywhere else in town generally is the buffer. So that's kind of a traditional layout.
Council member?
I don't do a lot of bicycling now, but I used to do an awful lot of bicycling. And it made me very nervous to have my bike lane right next to the parking, because I just envisioned a door opening right in front of me, and it scared the hell out of me. So I think that there's a real advantage if we can get the bike lane and the parking lane with some kind of separation. And the second and third one up here seem to do that better.
Yeah, that was my initial thought too, is, you know, you hear a lot of feedback from bicyclists and commuters about being uncomfortable next to the drive lane, but also being right there where the door is potentially going to swing open and catch you as well. So I think for those couple reasons, I like it being separated from the parking as well as the travel lane closer to the option closer to the curb.
Gotcha. And the nice thing is, even in this cross section, we could take the buffer and just flop it on the other side of the bike lane. So then you have the buffer next to the car doors. But either way, I hear that for the bikes, there should be some sort of buffer between them and the parked vehicles.
And that was one of the key factors I think that was pointed out that the public wanted to see. Not the top two, but I think the third or fourth one down on the list.
Nice.
So with this cross section, before we go away, this has parking on both sides, and we heard maybe we don't need it on both sides, and that would provide the space for that extra buffer because it's 6.5 feet of parking. Just brainstorming through this. We like the parking on the Fala side of the road. I won't call it east or whatever because the road curves, but the Fala side of the road, it's helpful to have that parking to give them extra space to queue up so they're not queuing up in the bike lane like they do today.
Could you come back with a layout on that, showing the overall of Fremont and where the
Yes.
parking would be, so we could see it?
Let me go to this plan view. So this drawing, yeah.
I agree with the parking only on one side, but then you could illustrate it a little better.
Certainly. So if we had parking lane on one side, it would be on the east side of the street. So that when you get towards Fala, there's a place for parents to park as they're going for pickup. And as you go further down, yeah, east side would make the most sense because when you get towards Wilson, there's a frontage road that's like you couldn't really park cars next to that little median there. Yeah, so parking on one side I think would probably be the best approach.
And where does your cross section change? Does it change in the east-west section of Fremont? Or the road gets narrower?
Oh, yeah. Your cross section changes once you get past Arlene. It narrows down to 2 lanes. And I do want to mention there is speed concerns down on this road as well, and that is part of the project. So that might be where we add elements such as like chicanes or bump outs. But I also want to mention that a part of the neighborhood traffic guide is to get approval from the neighborhood on the approach. So I think it is useful to get kind of key elements to work on now, but we might not need to nail it down entirely. We might be able to take it back and refine it and then send it to the neighborhood for ultimate approval. But I think we're making progress with the bike lane placement and the parking. I'm hearing that we only really need parking on the east side to accommodate the park and Fala. And so maybe another element that we can address. Let me go back to those. Or are we done with this plan view? Is there any other questions?
I was just gonna make a comment. I mean, I've been through this neighborhood several times. It doesn't seem like a neighborhood that's lacking for parking. It doesn't seem like it's overparked, I guess, with the exception of probably the school and the park. Is that an accurate statement? I mean, 'cause we're talking about the cross section, but what is the need outside of those 2 areas? What's the need for parking?
Yes, that's a good question. Originally, when we made the cross section with parking on both sides, it was just to eat up more space of the roadway because it is so wide. But there is potential to be creative with the buffers as Martin showed in those other alternatives. So instead of having parking on both sides, we could just have a larger buffer. So that's something we could explore.
And there isn't parking, sorry, I jumped in on you. There is not parking today on both sides of the road. That we'd be adding parking to quite a bit of this.
Yeah.
So we see some demand at the park and Fala are really the 2 areas. And then as a general principle, we try to provide parking on streets where people have houses fronting. It's pretty inconvenient if you live on a house long block and you can't park on your own street.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense on the, what is it, the east side of the road then too, 'cause that's where
Yes.
a lot of those driveways are.
Yes.
And then
That
adding
lines
the
up.
bike lane, people are gonna park in the bike lane.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly what'll happen.
And currently the parking kind of ends once you get past Brenda Loop. It disappears. There's parking near the park currently, but there's no parking as you go towards Follow. So we figured since we're rearranging the lane placement, it'd be worthwhile to put parking as you're going north so that there's a place for parents to park and they're not in the bike lane.
Okay. Online, it looks like we had a hand up from Commissioner Stone, but he's pulled it down. And then looks like a comment from Jules.
Yes, hi. Thank you for considering the placement of the bike lane. I just wanted to bring one other thing to mind. I really like the idea of having it adjacent to the curb, not only for cars opening their door into the biker space, but for that area where Fala has all the cars parked. There's a lot of motion with cars pulling in and out, and they would be crossing over the bike lane during those periods of time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's the next element do you need from us, David?
Yes, thank you. Let me go back to the cross section. Yeah, right. Yeah. Come on up here.
So I was thinking that maybe it'd be a good idea to put the parked car next to the curb and then split up the buffer. Put part of it next to the car and then the other part on the other side of the, or next to the bike lane and the other part next to the car, between the car and the travel lane. Because you have such a lot of room for the buffer. That's not the diagram that I was looking at. The one that had the 10-foot buffer.
Oh, the 10-foot buffer?
Yeah. So if you move the car over to the bike or to the curb and then split up the buffer between the travel lane and the bike lane.
Gotcha. Okay, I think I might have all the elements I might need because the big one is bike lane placement, like median versus 2 lanes. Another was for crossings. It seems there's a lot of interest in like pedestrian refuge islands at the crossing, specifically at the existing crossing at Brenda. I think that is a lot of interest there. And then also working out the fine details of where the traffic calming elements, such as the chicanes, potential chicanes, curb extensions, things like that go. And I think that's something we figure out in this next phase. So I feel okay, but I can turn it over to Martin and Jeff if there's more direction that they think is needed.
We can go through some of these elements. The only one I've thought of is the, I don't know if you've weighed in officially. I know we've gotten some comments on the center turn lane or a median in the middle versus having just 2 travel lanes side by side.
We can go through here for comments from the commission, but I mean, my input, if it's not necessary, then I wouldn't suggest putting it in, but if the numbers are there, reducing from a 4-lane to a 2-lane, if the numbers are there that would warrant it, then I would be in favor of putting that in just so that we don't have an overcorrection on roadway section and then find an issue down the road with backing up traffic trying to turn on residential roads. Any other thoughts from the commission?
I would just go back to the, if the objective is to lower speeds, what do you guys think is the best way to do that? And I think if you have a center median or a turn lane, that's an opportunity for people to drive around that and continue at a higher rate of speed.
Are there any other roads in Flagstaff with the big buffer zones where they can drive? They'll drive around on the right too. You got to watch the size of the buffer and the thing. So you have an advantage to drive around in the center. Is it more dangerous to drive it around to the right, impeding? You got to think about that.
The other benefit of this being all paint is that, you know, we can put it down and if a year later something's not going right, we can paint it again.
This is true. We have cost estimated the striping. You want to take a guess at how much it costs to stripe this mile?
$250,000?
100,000. That's our full budget for the year. So it's not cheap to redo. So we do, I appreciate and I agree we could change it if we needed to, but it's not a cheap change. And it tears up the pavement as we change. So we'd love to get it as close as possible, of course. Yeah, good. I mean, that's a good point. You provide the center turn lane. That's where people know to turn from. If you have generous enough buffers and no bikes or cars present, it's likely cars will go around on the right. That's pretty common practice. So yeah, it's a trade-off of what people should do and what people may do. And really volumes are low. It's probably not an issue either way in general. But yeah, thanks for bringing that one up. That would be good to.
Especially with that much real estate on the side.
Yeah.
So beyond that, we talked a little bit about raised medians, and this is probably cost prohibitive to have continuously along the roadway. But if we pick a couple of select locations that correspond to crossings, of course, the first one that we heard is Brenda, close to the park. Is that something that would be okay? So a median at a few select locations and for limited length, and raised if we can afford it.
My input, I think the raised medians do help with having those vertical elements help with the traffic calming more than just the striping. Kind of reduces down bad behavior, eliminates it, or at least it makes them think twice about it. Input from other commissioners?
Yeah, I support raised medians. They've been implemented a couple of ways in Flagstaff, and the one on Lone Tree South. It's just a hassle to have these little curbs and this Z crossing idea. Like, I don't know how many accidents happen with people running across the intersection, not pressing the second button, but I'm not sure it's something that needs to be solved. So my raised median suggestion would be to not make it harder for pedestrians to get across, especially if they're pushing things or riding bicycles.
You know, I believe in a few raised medians because we just talked about painting if cars can go around. Raised mediums, cars cannot go around.
In particular, to Councilmember McCarthy's point about if it's not a raised median the whole road, but in strategic locations, it makes it less of a nuisance for people that live and access their house off the road as well. Kind of similar thought process to Boulder Point, having a couple in strategic locations.
Okay, and I think just the last thing maybe were some of the traffic calming elements. And again, we'll have to look more carefully to see where they would be most beneficial and what they would add to the cost of the project and see if we're able to do that. We were thinking initially kind of at the south end of the corridor where it transitions from Linwood into Cheshire might be a good place for them. Are those something that you would support in the final design?
Commissioners, any thoughts, feedback?
So this is Commissioner Eckhoff. Can you just clarify what it is that you were talking about at the south end of putting in?
These are medians or bump outs that are raised ideally and extend into the roadway and really require vehicles to make a horizontal shift in their alignment. So there's a physical movement that has to be made that requires you to slow down to make that shift.
Gotcha. Thank you for the clarification. And that's where I thought you were going. I just wanted to clarify. And I would certainly, support that. Living right, I live on Fremont and right at the Peak View, the three-way intersection. And I think that would be a very useful element. And I do appreciate the additional comments that have been made around some sort of physical barrier or something raised off of the level of the roadway, along the way as you hone in on where those crossings or whatever features are going to be placed.
Commissioner Cooney, do you have a comment?
And thank you for that. And with the width of this road, we're not interfering with the bike lanes like we did previous and on some of the other roads when you put those in. I mean, we had a problem with what happened to the bike lanes.
That's correct. We have more space. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would also support horizontal deflection methods, especially if they can not interfere with the bike lanes.
Okay, I think that covers our list. It feels like we're about 90% designed. Thank you.
I guess I have one last comment. You know, the one other thing we heard repeatedly was snow clearing challenges. I think that's going to be kind of the trade-off here between these different options is what slows cars down the best might have the worst snow clearing. So just having some input from that team would be valuable the next time this presentation comes up.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, unless there's anything else needed from us or any other comments. We appreciate it. Good discussion. Nice presentation. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay, moving in the next section here, concluding general business. We've got the link here for the reports available for both the Bicycle Advisory Committee and the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and encourage commission members to attend those advisory committees as you're able to. Yep, Commissioner Koenig.
I had one question. So I looked at both of those, and the one link, the most recent meetings is from February, and the other one is from January. And so I think there have been meetings since then. I don't know if there's a recorded or if there's any way to get a more up-to-date input from those committees without attending them in person.
Do you want me to follow the link so we can see what's here? We are down several admin staff, so our minutes are behind. That's why you didn't get any Transportation Commission minutes either this month. I can click on this. Let's see where it goes, Martin. But we do record all of these meetings. It's a little data intensive. Most recent, is this one behind as well? Oh, it's downloading.
I didn't check the recording, so I can try that next time. I just clicked on the minutes.
Okay. The minutes are definitely behind. I don't know that we'll definitely be caught up next time because as you start falling behind, it really becomes a problem. If this video isn't current, we can make it current, and we maybe even can leave maybe a couple of videos since we're behind on minutes. Thanks for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Next section here, informational items to and from the commission and staff. Are there any items, either discussion for here or requested future agenda items from the commissioners? Looking and seeing none. Oh, Commissioner Koenig.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to think about how we could better communicate and work with our advisory committees. They, like we don't necessarily get regular reports from them, and without reading, either attending the meetings or having to go, relying on the minutes being up to date. I would just be curious what other options we have for getting feedback from them.
Council member?
Well, I'll note that every commission has a council liaison. So maybe it would make sense to have a transportation board liaison to their committees. So like one of you could go to each one of their meetings, and then that way at least one of you would know what's going on.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Thank you. Any thoughts from commissioners on that? If we want to discuss that further, or if there's somebody that's interested and willing to participate in those advisory committee meetings?
We can make this a discussion for next time if you'd like, brainstorm a few ideas, that being one. The minutes, maybe we even summarize the minutes even more and just do 2 minutes right here about what we've been doing the last couple months. I'm not sure what level of information you're looking for, but we can talk now or we can agendize it.
It'd be nice to give people an opportunity to think about it further. And Commissioner Koenig, you have a thought?
And you could bring in the possible ones and their calendars it would be a little easier to make decisions.
That sounds good.
Yeah, and another option might be, yeah, if the committees at the end of their sessions want to just have a, what are the most important things for the Transportation Commission know or something like that. But yeah, I'm finding it with it being an agenda item to discuss later.
Very good. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, some updates here on a handful of various projects, Jeff.
Yeah, we are progressing. I think we've said this in a couple of months, but design is moving forward. Boulder Point and Woodland Drive traffic calming projects. I think Boulder Point's ahead of Woodland Drive, but they're trying to catch up so we can advertise those together. It's still summer. We're still expecting to get those out this year and built. So those are still generally on schedule, though they've fallen behind a bit. Traffic calming website upgrade. I talked about that last month, but it wasn't quite all the way there. If you could look now, it's fully up to date. Pilot bike lanes, lots of discussion. We had this on your agenda at the last meeting, and we met with Bicycle Advisory Committee twice, and you probably noticed that all of those changes have been implemented on Butler and Beaver. Buffer, we were able to get the buffers in quite a few places, a little better than I was expecting. So I haven't had any feedback. I don't know, Martin, if you've heard from anyone, but it is a lot cleaner. Looks pretty good, but I don't know that I've had any feedback yet. And then Safe Streets and Roads for All grant, we did get that submitted since the last meeting. So that is, I think it's called the Butler Complete Streets. So it does the full permanent solution for the raised bike lanes on Butler Avenue from Milton to Sawmill. So that's bringing the curbs in, doing the wide raised bike lane and sidewalk. We'll hear back on that in December, I believe, is still the plan. So those are the updates I have for you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Sure.
And then a reminder, our next regular meeting is October 4th. Tentative agenda items, annual crash report and role of Transportation Commission. Comforting to see that on the on the future agenda items.
We finally have a light agenda. We might be able to get it on, but we'll have that commissioner discussion we just talked about, the BAC and PAC updates, and then potentially one of these neighborhoods will be ready to talk about again in 2 months. It's likely one of them will, but we'll adjust as we always do.
Very good. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time, your input, participation. With that, we will adjourn.
Thank you.